This is the story of Kang, the cowardly dog. One day, out of nowhere, he, along with half the population, got transported to a dungeon. Everyone else? They got these OP skills ready to dominate. But Kang, he got stuck with a useless skill, resurrection. And let me tell you, that skill, it was nothing but a curse for him. He died more times than he could count, got smashed, got chopped into pieces, burned to death. Hell, one time he even got smashed by this goddamn thick goblin. And to make things even worse, his only family, his sister, is... Guys, please smash that 4,000 likes and hit that subscribe button if you're new. If you want to support me, I know you got this. Now let's continue. It all started on that fateful day. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve, and like always, Kang came home after getting rejected by yet another company. And of course his sister, like always, started scolding him, asking, "Why the hell can't you get a job? For how long will I have to take care of you?" Kang had enough of all this. He was depressed, and to make things worse, he was also drunk. His head was spinning, so he just went straight to bed, even while his sister was still scolding him. As he lay there, he started to wonder why he was such a loser. He slowly fell asleep, thinking, tomorrow will be better. It was midnight, New Year's Eve, when suddenly a creepy voice murmured in his ear, startling him awake. The next thing he knew, he was in an endless white room. Before he could comprehend what was happening, words started appearing in front of his eyes. Suddenly, that same creepy voice welcomed Kang and informed him that the tutorial would begin shortly. Kang, unable to understand what was going on, questioned if someone had kidnapped him in his sleep or if someone was playing a cruel joke on him. Fear gripped him, but then he remembered that he had been sleeping. This realization brought him some relief. He must be dreaming. Thinking that he was just dreaming, Kang became happy. After all, he was already very depressed in real life. So finally having a dream felt like a small escape. But suddenly the same voice interrupted his thoughts, telling him that he was about to enter stage 1. To clear it, he would need to reach the destination point at the end of the bridge. The voice also warned that if he failed to complete the task, he would be killed. Kang started to grasp the gravity of the situation, but he still couldn't understand which bridge or what depth the voice was referring to. Suddenly, he was teleported to a dark cave. As he looked around, he got shocked. He noticed the ground beneath his feet creaking ominously. In front of him were several narrow stone bridges. He wasn't alone, many people were standing around him, but just below them, molten lava bubbled menacingly. One wrong step, and it would be the end. The sight of the lava shocked Kang to his core. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was just a dream, right? But the sensations were so intense, it didn't feel like any dream he'd ever had. He began to question the reality of the situation. Who were all these people? What was going on here? Looking around, he saw that the other people seemed just as shocked as he was. They were all standing there, bewildered and scared. Kang couldn't help but think, what kind of stupid dream is this? As he was trying to make sense of everything, a familiar voice called out to him. Kang turned to his left, and to his shock, he saw his sister standing on the same bridge. She was terrified, crying uncontrollably. The sight of his sister in this strange place filled Kang with even more shock, and the first this he said to his sister was, "Why the hell are you in my first dream of this year? This is ridiculous." This made her sister more shocked, and she replied, "I should be the one saying this. What is my brother doing in my dream?" She was still scared and confused, beginning to wonder if this really was just a dream. Everything felt too real. But Kang wasn't ready to listen to his sister's fears. In a serious tone, he said, "Don't act like this is your dream," because it was clearly his. But his sister only got more furious. She yelled back, asking if this was really the time to be arguing about whose dream it was. The heat of the lava and this sensation was too real to be a dream? And the bigger question, was it even possible to have such a natural conversation like this in a dream? But Kang, being a bit of a dumbass, he explained that a brain can be easily tricked. People always say they can't feel pain in their dreams, but that is a lie. Kang had experiences where it felt like he was really pissing, only to wake up and find that his blanket was safe. Hearing this, his sister got really annoyed. "Good job, very good job saying something so embarrassing in front of your sister." But Kang shrugged it off, saying it didn't matter. It was his dream, after all. With that, he began moving forward, determined to see where this bizarre experience would lead. After hearing this, Ju-hee was shocked. How could her brother be so dumb? She asked Kang where he was going, and Kang, slowly balancing himself and with a taunting tone, responded, "Didn't you read the system notification? It clearly said we have to go to the other side of the bridge to clear the level." He continued, "Well, I guess since it's My dream? An NPC like you couldn't know that. Hearing this, his sister got even more annoyed that Kang called her an NPC. She explained that she had also heard the notification, but asked Kang if he wasn't really scared. What if he fell from there? Kang dismissed her concerns, calling Juhi stupid because, after all, it was just a dream. He explained that even if he fell and died, what difference would it make? But before Kang could finish his sentence, a shadow fell in front of his eyes. Someone, a human trying to move forward on the bridge above him, slipped and fell. Kang watched slowly as the person plummeted down and then saw them burning in the lava below. As the unfortunate soul fell into the lava, he started screaming very loudly, burning right in front of Kang and his sister. The person's body melted before their eyes. Rotten, burning smell, creepy, both of them, and seeing this, Kang's lungs seemed to stop working. After that, Kang and his sister didn't say anything for a while. They just stood there, watching the person die slowly and painfully. Kang's face was a sight to behold. After a moment, his sister asked, "What were you saying?" Kang's face was worth seeing. He shivered and tried to speak, stuttering. The scream just sounded a little too realistic, right? I'm not scared at all." But he was so scared that he couldn't even speak properly. Seeing this, his sister sighed. His sister then crouched down and told Kang, "If you're so scared, then bow down and crawl forward like me." Saying this, she started moving forward slowly. Kang was clearly very scared. He still shivered, trying to save face, saying, "Who was scared? I wasn't scared." But then he thought, Juhi's idea isn't bad, so he decided to bow down and crawl. The scene shifted, showing that some time had passed. Many people had moved forward, while many others had fallen. But Kang and his sister were still slowly making their way forward. Although Kang's sister was scared, she didn't show it to her cowardly brother. She asked Kang, "What does he think happened to them? Any idea?" Kang, still in denial, insisted that it was probably just a very realistic nightmare. Kang's sister replied, "He is still stuck on that? Kang should have already realized by now that this isn't the case, right? Does Kang really think a dream this realistic can exist?" She continued, speaking in a very serious tone. "There's definitely something going on, something they can't even begin to imagine, and if they die here, maybe they die in real life too." Hearing this, Kang couldn't hold back any longer and started crying very loudly. For so long, Kang had been trying to be strong, but finally he broke down. He shouted, You witch! I was trying my best to ignore it. So why do you keep bringing this up? I'm stuck here, frozen in fear." The thought that if he died here, he could die in reality too scared him so much that he couldn't move. He started shivering uncontrollably. Seeing this, his sister thought to herself that Kang must be the most unreliable older brother in the world. Kang finally just lay down there, paralyzed by fear. He started shivering even more, saying, "I'll just rest here a little before continuing." His hands and legs trembled with fear, but he tried to change the topic. He forced a smile and said, "You know, the possibility still exists that this is just a dream, and maybe when he wake up, everything will be gone." But before Kang could finish his thought, the same voice echoed around them. It announced that a set amount of time had passed since the start of the tutorial, and that no player had completed it. As a result, the difficulty would now increase. As soon as the voice stopped, a loud crackling sound started. Hearing this, Kang and his sister became very scared. Suddenly, the bridge behind Kang started breaking apart, not just his bridge, but everyone's. Seeing this, everyone became very scared and started running. Half of the people fell while running, while the other half kept going. But Kang, already terrified, became even more scared and couldn't move. His sister stood up and shouted to Kang, "Run fast or you'll die!" Kang finally managed to get up and started running. His sister was ahead of him and Kang was trailing behind, still very scared. He kept repeating to himself, "It's okay. The bridge isn't too narrow. If I don't trip, I'll reach the end. Just look ahead. Focus on the path. Just keep looking ahead." Saying this, he kept running as fast as he could. Finally, after a while, he saw the end of the bridge. Seeing this, he felt a surge of happiness. He thought that as soon as he reached the end, this nightmare would be over. But suddenly, he heard a crackling sound. He looked to his left and saw that his sister was also about to reach the end. But the ceiling above her was breaking apart. He called out to his sister loudly, but it was too late. At that moment, something inside Kang awakened. His brotherly instincts kicked in, and he jumped from his position. He landed on his sister's bridge, and with a burst of speed, grabbed her. Without hesitating, he jumped from there, determined to save her. Then we see the bridge beneath them start to crack, and finally Kang with his landed on the end of the bridge. If they'd hesitated even a second longer, they'd have been done for. No doubt about it. Before they can even catch their breath, that same voice echoes through the air again. It congratulates them on clearing stage 1 of the tutorial, which is the first of a total of 8 stages. At the same time, the notification informs them they've leveled up. They've temporarily awakened their powers, which will fully awaken when the tutorial is over. Kang don't pay much attention to this notification, though. Kang just lies there, lets out a sigh of relief, and says he can't even move a finger anymore. But Juhi, she was reading that system notification real serious, curiosity written all over her face. But Kang shouted, "Forget all that. You're not even gonna thank me for saving your life?" Juhi casually muttered a thank you, but Kang couldn't help but feel a little confused. Just a casual thank you, really? Juhi, on the other hand, was confused. What the heck is this temporarily awakened status window? In front of her was her status window. Her level was 1, her strength was 7, agility 12, vitality 6, magic power 13. But the most interesting part? Her skill was calm, which explained why she was so calm in this crazy situation. But when Kang heard the word system window, he lit up. Is this the same system window I'm thinking about? Even though he was dead tired, he somehow managed to open his system window, and boy, oh boy, his skill was resurrection. But before he could really check it out, he woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. He sat there silently for a while, taking it all in, realizing he was back in his room. It was morning. Was that really a dream, he thought? Was it? After a while, it's revealed that this strange news has spread all over the world. Almost half the population had the same dream, being on top of a lava bridge and having to complete some fixed level. The whole world's in chaos, but there's one thing in common. Every single person who had the dream was between 18 and 40 years old. After a while, Juhi comes bursting into Kang's room, screaming her head off. Both of them, nervously and in a panic, start babbling about what had happened. Kang, barely catching his breath, starts firing off questions. Juhi had appeared in his dream. He almost died. And what about that status window? Juhi, just as flustered, starts asking her own questions. They begin arguing. Juhi was almost going to die, and Kang had saved her life. They go on and on about how realistic it all was, talking so fast that neither of them can understand a word the other is saying. Juhi finally gets fed up and screams, "At least let me speak first." Kang, already riled up, snaps back, saying that Juhi is the one interrupting. "Let me speak first!" Well, it's just typical brother-sister bickering. They keep going at it until they both give up and retreat to opposite corners of the room. After a while, their stomachs start growling with hunger. They decide to eat first and then sort everything out. While they're eating, the internet is going nuts. Everyone's talking about the end of the world, realistic dreams, shared dreams, apocalypse theories, you name it. The two of them sit down to eat, and finally, they manage to talk to each other without all the yelling. They start to realize that what they experienced wasn't just a dream. They had actually met and talked to each other, for real. It wasn't just something happening in their country either. Seems like people all over the world had the same dream. But Kang reads some strange news. Apparently, people who died in that dream didn't actually die in real life. According to the reports, 4 out of 10 people died in the dream, but nothing happened to them in reality. But Juhi wasn't so sure. She says that even though they didn't die, the experience was so realistic that if they had fallen into the lava, the feeling of dying would have been so intense it could have ruined their lives. Juhi even read online that the people who died in that dream ended up admitted to mental hospitals. They were so traumatized. They continue eating in silence, but then there's a loud noise outside. Kang goes to check it out, and what he sees is pure chaos. People have gone mad. They're stealing food, some are carrying God's posters and marching down the streets, and others are convinced the world is ending. Thieves and robbers are going wild, looting everything in sight. The world is in shambles. Juhi knows she can't go to work like this, and Kang, well, there's no way he's going out to look for a job. Inside, Kang is actually kinda happy. Finally, he doesn't have to worry about finding a job. He even starts thinking maybe the world really is going to end. Then Kang asks Juhi if she's tried opening her status window in the real world. Juhi shakes her head and says no. But when she does open it, there's a message that reads, "In 4 years, 364 days, 17 hours, 3 minutes, and 13 seconds, a disaster will strike. A disaster that will end the world." Hearing this, Juhi starts panicking and asks, "What do we do now?" But Kang just shrugs and says, "The world's gonna end in 5 years, what's the point of stressing about it now? Better to stay home and figure out what's going on with this tutorial guy." Juhi thinks for once Kang's actually making some sense. Meanwhile, the world slowly begins to calm down. The police start catching the thieves, and people begin to return to some sense of normalcy. Night falls, and everyone goes to sleep. Kang drifts off as well, but as soon as he closes his eyes, that same voice welcomes him back. The voice asks if he'd like to see the explanation and instructions for basic interference. Kang, already annoyed, says, "Skip all this and just show me my status window." The system complies, showing him his status window. Kang's still at level 1. His strength is 8, agility 9, stamina 8, magic power 14, and his unique ability is resurrection. Kang doesn't know if his stats are any good because he's only seen his own. The only thing that stands out is his magic power, which is higher than the other stats. He figures he's probably going to be good at magic, but when he checks his unique ability, resurrection, he gets shocked. He smirks and says, "This smells like an overpowered cheat ability." Kang checks the details of his resurrection ability. It says his resurrection rank is Z. After 24 hours of his death, he can come back to life. If the resurrection location isn't specified, it will take place at the last sleeping location. But there's a penalty. Kang's level will decrease by 1, and all his abilities will be reduced by 50% for 24 hours. However, in the tutorial, the resurrection penalty doesn't apply. Kang can't contain himself. He starts dancing around. He's got a god-level cheat ability. He thinks to himself, "Finally, I'm going to be able to get out of this pathetic loser life." But he had no idea what was going to happen to him. The scene shifts, and we see Kang wielding a big hammer, trying to fight an ugly goblin. He's swinging with all his might, trying to take down the goblin, but the goblin dodges his attacks easily. The objective of the second stage is to kill all the goblins, but Kang isn't able to take down even one. After struggling in front of the goblin for some time, he finally kills it, but the only reason he managed it was because he launched a surprise attack first. Goblin blood was pouring from its head, and Kang's hand was shaking. His whole body was covered in that disgusting blood, and Kang can't believe it. He's actually killed someone for real. The sight of it makes Kang feel like vomiting. He turns away, walking slowly, but he doesn't realize someone is waiting for him. A damn perverted goblin was stalking Kang, watching him with a drooling mouth. Kang got shocked to see the goblin in front of him. This goblin isn't like the others. His name is Goblin Millet, and he's big, thick, and juicy, ready for some action. He's got a 2-meter-long weapon ready to insert into Kang's body, a meat chopper in his hand. Seeing this, Kang is terrified. He was already struggling to beat a small goblin like a chicken leg piece. How's he gonna take down this monster? In fact, when Kang noticed that 2-meter thing, he got terrified, thinking, "No matter what, I don't want that thing inside me." But the thick guy had something different planned. He suddenly started laughing maniacally, saliva drooling from his mouth like he was going to suck Kang dry. The thick goblin immediately spun his meat chopper, and Kang tried to block it. But with a body chronically lacking exercise due to long-term unemployment and armed with only a 70-centimeter-long weapon, there was no way Kang could stop him. Kang started crying. The goblin easily disarmed Kang, throwing his small weapon away in a single blow. But the thick goblin didn't kill Kang right away. Oh no. He started playing with Kang's body slowly, taking his time, slowly ripping body parts one by one, and God knows what else he did to Kang. Ew, I don't even want to think about it. Now Kang was almost half dead, crying with tears in his eyes. He could barely keep his eyes open, his body covered in blood, as the goblin dragged him away, holding him by the neck. The goblin was laughing at Kang, who couldn't understand what was happening to him. "Why do I have to go through this?" he thought. The pain in his body was unbearable, like he was in hell. Kang was left wondering why the goblin wasn't just letting him die. All he could do was wish that he would wake up from this nightmare as soon as possible. But Kang's suffering didn't end there. That day, he realized just how much blood a human body can hold. That thick and juicy goblin? After having his twisted fun with Kang, he dragged him for hours, holding him by the collar, taking him who knows where. And for all those hours, Kang endured unimaginable pain, unbearable, hellish suffering. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the goblin hauled him in front of 3 more goblins, and then all 4 of them had their way with him. Kang's death came from blood loss and intense torture. He woke up in his bed screaming like a madman. Hearing his screams, Kang's sister Juhi woke up. She was angry, annoyed, and frustrated. She burst into his room with a loud bang, scolding him. "What is this crap happening again so early in the morning? Why are you screaming like a madman at 4 a.m.? And to top it off, Juhi's head was aching, and Kang wasn't letting her get any sleep. But when Juhi noticed Kang, poor Kang, curled up in the corner of his bed, wrapped in a blanket, shaking like a leaf, scratching his nails like a madman, she was shocked. All Kang could mutter was, "Goblins! I'm scared! Please, no more!" Seeing this, Juhi was both shocked and confused. After some time, Juhi managed to bring Kang to the dining table, but he was still shivering uncontrollably. While sitting there, Kang, still trembling, told her everything. He recounted how he died from excessive bleeding and what had happened to him from start to finish. But Kang couldn't bring himself to tell his sister the full horror, that the goblins had their fun with him. He only told her the basics. First, that thick goblin started pulling out all his fingernails and toenails, one by one. Then he crushed all of Kang's fingers. But it didn't stop there. The goblin then started pulling out Kang's teeth, one by one. Juhi, hearing this, couldn't take any more. She closed her ears and said that if she listened to any more, she'd faint. Juhi then shared that she couldn't complete stage 2 either, but nothing like that had happened to her. She had died from just one shock from a normal goblin. She then asked Kang, "Is that why you were crying?" At that moment, Kang felt deeply ashamed that he had cried in front of his younger sister. Trying to defend himself, Kang stood on his chair and shouted, "Because you haven't experienced all this yourself, you can't understand! Even if Mike Tyson was here, he'd be shouting louder than me and probably would have run to his mom." Seeing Kang's outburst, Juhi calmed down and said, "It's okay. I was just joking to lighten the mood, and it looks like it worked." She added, "Seeing you shouting like this, I guess you're okay now." Then she asked, "But don't you think you need to go to the hospital?" Kang was confused. "Hospital?" he asked. Juhi explained that news had spread worldwide about how people who died from goblin attacks in this level had become so traumatized that psychiatric departments were seeing 10 times the usual number of patients. But no one had been hurt as badly as Kang. Kang, trying to save face, said, "I'm not that weak. I'm a man, and a man doesn't feel pain." Hearing this, Juhi felt cringed. But then she shared some good news. It's been reported that those who die in the tutorial won't have the dream again the next day. Hearing this, Kang was overjoyed. He thought, finally, I'll be able to sleep peacefully tonight. But will he really? That night, as Kang went to sleep, the same voice welcomed him back. The voice said, "Kang's special ability, Resurrection, has been activated." The tutorial would start again for him. At that moment, Kang felt his world collapse, like he'd seen a ghost. The air seemed to leave his body and he started screaming, "Son of a dog! Who made this disgusting system?" Finally, after an hour of venting his frustration, the system notified him that because he was in the tutorial zone, he wouldn't be penalized for dying. But Kang was completely traumatized. He hadn't slept for 8 hours, thinking that when he woke up in the real world, he'd finally escape this nightmare. But even after 8 hours, nothing changed. He in fact slept in the tutorial zone, but when he woke up, he was in the same place. Kang had been stuck there for 2 days now, but he couldn't find a way out. He realized there was only one way to escape, either complete the level or die. But if he died, he'd just wake up the next day to do it all over again. This thought pushed Kang closer to a mental breakdown. After a few hours, accepting his reality, Kang got up and saw a bunch of weapons in front of him. This time, he chose 2. A crossbow for long-distance kills, and a heavy weapon for close combat. He felt pretty confident about the crossbow. "Let me show you," he said. "I used to be a great shot as a kid." With intense focus, he aimed for the thick goblin's forehead, but the arrow only grazed the goblin's cheek. Nothing happened. The thick goblin turned around, saw Kang, and started drooling. Kang knew that if this goblin caught him again, the same thing would happen all over again. Kang also had a spear with him, so he grabbed it and prepared to fight. Since the spear was a long weapon, he managed to kill a small goblin easily. Seeing this, he was thrilled. But as soon as he tried to pull the spear out of the goblin's chest, he realized it was stuck in the bones. Before Kang could free the spear, the thick goblin crushed his head, killing him instantly. Kang woke up again, clutching his chest, gasping for air. But this time, he was strangely happy. At least he had died in one shot and avoided the torture. Day 3 rolled around, and Kang found himself back in the same place. The system notified him again that Stage 2 was about to start. By now, Kang was fed up with hearing the system notifications. He even threatened, "If you say it again, I'll finish the system myself." This time, Kang didn't rush in like a madman to kill the goblins. He realized he was a pathetic loser weakling compared to them. He remembered watching videos of professional fighters on YouTube and decided to try something new. After watching those videos, he approached the goblins with a shield and a sword. But once again, he was killed in a single shot. Kang woke up, screaming again. By this point, he was genuinely mad. He grabbed his head and started screaming like a psychopath, vowing that next time he would kill every single goblin. Hearing all this commotion, Juhi came to check on him, but Kang kept repeating the same thing over and over. "I'll kill you, I'll kill every goblin." It was like the soul of the goblin slayer had possessed him. Seeing all this, Juhi thought to herself, one screw was loose in his mind before, now they've all come loose. By day 5, Kang had realized that watching videos on YouTube wasn't enough. He needed real-life experience. So in the same cave where he kept spawning, he took his sword and started practicing for hours, swinging it over and over. He trained relentlessly, even though he was exhausted, but his hard work paid off. After swinging the sword for an hour, the system notified him that his stamina had increased by 1. This pushed Kang to go beyond his limits. Seeing this, Kang was thrilled, but he collapsed from exhaustion. Frustrated, he thought, after swinging the sword for 8 hours, only 1 stamina point increased? This is injustice. Then he remembered that he had an additional stat point, so he put it into his strength. Now, with an extra point in strength and increased stamina, he thought he could finally take down the goblin. Filled with confidence, he screamed as he charged at the goblin again, but once more, the goblin killed Kang in a single blow. Kang woke up screaming yet again. For the next 15 days, Kang returned to the tutorial zone like a madman. He exercised, did push-ups, trained with his sword, and increased his stats. When he got tired of training, he'd let the goblins kill him in one blow and return to the real world. But all this took a toll on Kang's mind. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown when the system notified him that he had acquired basic swordsmanship at level F. Seeing this, Kang was surprised. The system explained that this swordsmanship skill was only used by local thugs, but it was better than nothing. Kang didn't care about the details. He was just happy to have acquired a skill. Although he had been training for hours, as soon as he picked up his sword, something changed in him. His eyes turned red, and he started screaming like a madman, filled with an uncontrollable rage. He shouted, "Today I'm going to kill every single goblin." His voice echoed through the cave, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. Although Kang had spent more than 15 to 20 days in the tutorial zone, in reality only 7 days had passed. During these days, Kang had gathered a lot of information. First off, there were only 5 goblins in the zone. 4 of them were the small chicken leg peace goblins, which Kang managed to defeat one by one. The main problem, however, was the perverted thick goblin. He was tough, making him very difficult to defeat. Kang had defeated the small goblins and now stood face to face with the thick one. The goblin attacked Kang with his meat chopper, but Kang dodged the blow with his shield. Kang had changed a lot. Now he could see the goblin's attacks coming. He could block and dodge them. With a dead, serious face, Kang unlocked his basic swordsmanship ability and tried to cut the goblin's head off. But once again, Kang only managed to scratch the goblin's face. He was already exhausted from defeating the other 4 goblins, and now after fighting the thick goblin, he was nearly spent, shivering with fatigue. Sensing Kang's weakness, the thick goblin took advantage, swinging his meat chopper and knocking Kang's sword far away. Kang was surprised, but managed to dodge another attempt by the goblin to cut his leg. Smirking, Kang thought to himself that this goblin really enjoyed torturing him. After fighting him so many times, Kang had memorized the goblin's attack pattern. The goblin never tried to kill Kang outright. He just wanted to capture him alive and have fun torturing him. This knowledge gave Kang a small advantage. Taking that advantage, Kang quickly bent down and kicked mud into the goblin's face, causing him to cry out in pain as the dirt stung his eyes. The goblin shouted loudly in agony. Seizing the moment, Kang picked up a large stone and smashed it into the goblin's leg with great force, breaking it. The goblin screamed in pain, thrashing his meat chopper wildly. Kang circled behind him while the goblin was still reeling from the attack. By the time the thick goblin opened his eyes, it was too late. Kang, screaming, "I am the strongest! I am inevitable!" smashed the goblin's face with the stone, causing blood to gush from the goblin's mouth and nose. The thick goblin collapsed, his body trembling as he struggled to breathe. Kang was overjoyed. patting himself on the back and praising himself for his victory. But the goblin wasn't dead yet. He was unconscious. Kang's face twisted into a sinister smile, his eyes gleaming with revenge. With a chilling grin, he whispered, "I'm going to torture this bastard as much as he tortured me." And with that, Kang tortured the goblin until he was dead. As soon as the goblin died, the system congratulated Kang for clearing Stage 2. He was awarded 5 additional stat points and a reward that allowed him to choose any weapon of his choice. Kang spread his arms, looked up at the sky, and said, "This is the power of the ultimate being! Am I a god?" He then started laughing like a maniac. The scene shifted, and we saw Kang back at his house, wearing an apron and cooking in the kitchen. Despite being a big deal in the tutorial, he was still a loser at home. Living at his sister's house for free meant he had to wake up every morning and cook. Kang told himself he was cooking in celebration of clearing Stage 2. He was in a good mood, happily tasting the food, when suddenly, with a bam, Juhi burst through the door. Startled, Kang burned his mouth on the hot food. Juhi, utterly shocked, asked if Kang had really cleared Stage 2. But before he could answer, a loud noise echoed across the earth, announcing that the tutorial had been completed. Those who had completed the tutorial could now freely use their abilities in the real world. Kang and Juhi were surprised, but their surprise didn't end there. Another notification appeared, stating that the dungeon was activating, and the whole world started shaking. Juhi and Kang ran to the balcony, and what they saw was beyond belief. A huge, creepy black door had appeared just outside their house. The system explained that this was a dungeon, and only those who had completed any level of the tutorial would be able to use it. This dungeon had appeared all over the world. The system then displayed a countdown indicating that there were 4 years, 3 days, 57 hours, 13 minutes, and 51 seconds remaining until complete connection with the Hakim dimension. After the dungeon appeared, the whole world plunged into chaos. Kang and Juhi decided to stay inside and look for organized, reliable information. That's when Kang discovered that the tutorial wasn't actually over yet. It turned out that a lot of people had just turned 18 that day and had received the tutorial for the first time. This meant that anyone who turned 18 would experience the tutorial. The world was going crazy, but Kang wasn't paying attention to all that. He was too excited to open his status window. He dramatically extended his hand and said, "Status window, open!" But nothing happened for a few seconds. Finally, the status window appeared, but it stated that the tutorial was still in progress, so Kang couldn't use it yet. Kang was confused, but then he realized that there were a total of 8 stages in the tutorial. It had been 8 days since the first tutorial started for others, meaning they had completed it and could use their status windows. But because of his resurrection ability, Kang was stuck in Stage 2. This meant that until he completed all 8 stages, he wouldn't be able to use his status window. Kang was very sad upon realizing this. He asked Juhi if she had found any information about Stage 3 online. Juhi explained that the tutorial was so difficult that very few people had reached Stage 3 or 4, and those who had completed it were keeping the information secret. They didn't want others to gain power so easily. But Kang, showing off his body and biceps, said, "I don't need that information anyway. I'm a genius, and I'll complete Stage 3 just like that." But will he really be able to do it? Let's see. The scene shifted again, showing a beautiful night with a glowing moon. In that moonlight, a glittering, delicious-looking golden liquid was falling like a waterfall. It turned out that it wasn't a waterfall at all, but a tribal man peeing, and that pee was falling directly on Kang's face. Kang was sitting quietly in a ghillie suit, and the tribal man was peeing on his head. The pee dripped slowly down Kang's mouth, and his mind filled with rage. "I will kill you! I will definitely kill you, you nigga!" Then we go 10 hours back, in a flashback, to when Kang first arrived at Stage 3. As soon as he stepped into this new stage, the system welcomed him and announced that the name of the stage was Patience and Endurance Test. In any situation, the clear condition was that Kang had to kill a Gurkhan chieftain without anyone knowing. The fail condition, death. When Kang looked down at himself, he noticed he was wearing a ghillie suit. After assessing his situation, he realized this was some sort of hitman or assassin-type mission. He had never heard of a monster named Gurkhan Chieftain, so his first step was to find it. But before setting out on his mission, Kang wanted to check what rewards he had earned from Stage 2. He opened his status window and saw that he had leveled up from level 2 to level 4. His strength and agility were both at 10, stamina at 11, and magic at 14, with an additional stat point of 7. Not only that, he now had 3 abilities: basic swordsmanship, basic shield technique, and basic crossbow technique. Seeing this, Kang was amazed and shouted, "I am so rich! This is exactly how a status window should look." But Kang's happiness didn't last long. As soon as he opened the details for his basic shield and basic crossbow skills, he saw that they were practically useless. The shield skill was good enough to block local kids from bullying him, and the crossbow skill could only kill small goons. Kang's enthusiasm quickly turned to annoyance. Then, he remembered that because he cleared Stage 2, he had received a weapon as a reward. He eagerly opened his inventory and found a sword. Clicking on it, he pulled out a sparkling sword from his inventory. Kang admired the sword carefully, feeling very cool and powerful. He took the sword in his hand and started laughing like a madman, saying, "This is so awesome! I've always wanted to hold a sword like this." But the system, ever the buzzkill, notified him again. "This is just a shabby longsword." Kang's excitement turned to irritation once more, and he left in a huff. As Kang moved forward, he narrated to himself that Charlos Hathcock was a legendary sniper who had successfully assassinated a general from 1.4 kilometers away after crawling for 3 days. Kang respected him a lot. Kang had been crawling for 10 hours and had finally reached his destination, a village guarded by tribal people with drums beating in the background. He started thinking about how to kill the chieftain. There were many small huts, but Kang assumed the chief would be in the biggest one. At that moment, a guard slowly approached Kang, but Kang didn't notice him. After crawling in the grass for the past 10 hours, Kang had leaked pee, making his pants sticky and causing grass to cling to his body. Insects were biting him, and rainwater was soaking him to the ass. Kang was deep in thought when suddenly the guard appeared in front of him. The AIR seemed to leave Kang's lungs as he realized he might be caught. Kang looked up, and there stood a big, thick, muscular guard staring straight down at him. Kang thought his mission was over, but the guard slowly lifted his pants and started pissing directly on Kang's head. The guard, oblivious to Kang's presence, had simply come to pee in the grass, unaware that someone was hidden there. The pee kept flowing, dripping slowly into Kang's mouth. Kang's head was bursting with anger, his body trembling with rage. But he knew he had to stay calm, had to endure this humiliation. "I have to endure," he kept telling himself. "No matter what happens, I have to endure." The system had said this was a test of patience and endurance, and Kang was trying his best to hold it together. But then the guard started playing with his pee, letting it splash onto Kang's face. That was it. That was the final straw. Kang's rope of patience snapped. He leaped up, screaming, and started chasing after the guard, yelling, "I'm gonna cut your little pee-pee off!" The guard turned around in shock, seeing Kang's face still covered in his pee. Kang, screaming like an animal, charged at the guard with his sword in hand. In one swift blow, he killed the guard, cutting him clean in two. The guard's body fell to the ground, and Kang gave a satisfying smile. But his actions had alerted the other guards. They quickly surrounded Kang, more than 100 of them. Kang stood there, realizing he had really messed up. So he decided to go out with a bang. He thought, "I might as well say the line I've always wanted to try." Kang screamed with all his might, "Come at me, you son of bastards!" The guards charged at him, but because of his scream, the system notified Kang that he had acquired a new skill, Lion's Roar of Rage. No one knew what skill it was, but what was clear was that all the guards tore Kang to pieces and fed him to the animal. The next day, Kang was furious. He grabbed his ghillie suit in his hand and screamed, "I will kill everyone one by one!" His scream was so intense that the system notified him that his Lion's Roar of Rage had been upgraded to D-grade. This new skill allowed him to lower the stats and morale of surrounding enemies and remove all debuffs on himself. We then see Kang throwing his ghillie suit into the air and screaming, "I will kill each and every one of you damn bastards!" before charging toward the guards. Last time, Kang had spent 10 hours hiding in the bushes, observing that in the morning, the guards would scatter to go hunting. This meant they were easier to pick off one by one in the morning. Armed with this knowledge, Kang began cutting them down one by one, making his way to the tent. In a moment, Kang was inside the tent, his face twisted into a sinister smile. He hissed, "I'm here, you bastard Gurkhan chieftain!" But what he saw next made him go crazy. Inside the tent was a fat, ugly chieftain sitting comfortably, but next to him were two mages activating spells. With a single command from the chieftain, the mages released their spells on Kang. Kang suddenly felt stuck, as if the gravity around him had increased tenfold. He couldn't move. He was trapped. Kang didn't understand how to get out of this situation until he remembered his lion's roar of rage. Taking a deep breath, he screamed, "Die, you ugly fat ass!" The debuff was lifted instantly, and even the chieftain was shocked. Kang didn't waste a second. He charged at the chieftain, a satisfying smile on his face, and declared, "I am inevitable," before slicing the chieftain in two. With that, the system notified him that he had completed Stage 3 of the tutorial. Kang had gained a new ability, physical regeneration, which was B rank as a clear reward. And because Kang had completed Stage 3 in the shortest time possible, a new world record, he earned an additional reward, a title, the Undying League, which would increase his stats by 1. Kang paused for a moment, thinking, I completed Stage 3 in just 2 days. It had taken him weeks to complete Stage 2, and everyone knew what a mess he had been in Stage 1. Am I really a genius? He became very happy, imagining that if he kept clearing stages at this rate, he would complete Stage 4 in just a few minutes. He started fantasizing about himself as a legendary knight standing atop a slain dragon. But reality quickly caught up with him. A month had passed, and Kang still hadn't completed Stage 4. One morning, while cooking and watching the news, Kang suddenly woke up screaming. Juhi, his sister, wasn't even surprised. It had become a routine. She sighed and muttered, "There he goes again with his bullshit." She turned off the gas stove and remarked that if Kang kept waking up screaming like this, the neighbors would think she was killing him every morning. Juhi asked Kang, "What happened today? Did you slip, hit your head on a rock, and die?" She was clearly making fun of him. But then we see a very thick leg step out of Kang's room. In a loud voice, someone shouted, "I cleared it, you idiot!" Juhi, still half asleep, but then she saw Kang, his whole body wrapped in a red aura, screaming, "I just fucked everyone up!" Juhi didn't take Kang's words seriously at first, but as he stepped into the light, she was shocked, bewildered, and confused. She couldn't speak for a moment, but then she screamed, "What happened to you?" Standing in front of her was Kang, his body now swollen and twice the size it used to be, muscles bulging, his entire frame having become 10 times. After some time, we see Juhi, confused and bewildered, sitting down to have breakfast with Kang. She couldn't help but ask, "How did you become like this, Kang?" Kang, clearly very annoyed and frustrated, snapped back, "This tutorial won't let me live in peace. It's turned my life into hell." Juhi, still not fully understanding, said, "All that's fine, but day by day you're starting to look more like a criminal." Kang, with a hint of sarcasm, joked, "Wow, thanks. My little sister thinks I look like a criminal." And just like that, the two of them fell into their typical brother-sister bickering. After a while, with a serious expression, Kang explained that Stage 4 wasn't as hard as it seemed. Stage 4's theme was leadership, he began. All I had to do was lead a party, go inside the dungeon, and destroy its core. Simple, right? In the beginning, his party members seemed kind and helpful, but soon they started arguing, fighting over who would take the lead, how the resources would be managed, who would get the drops. Somehow, Kang managed to convince everyone and took over as the leader. After clearing Stage 3, he had acquired the Intermediate Body Regeneration ability, a B-grade skill that allowed any cuts, burns, or fractures to regenerate automatically using mana. This made it easier for him to lead the group. Juhi, curious, asked, "If everything was going so well, why did it take you a month to complete Stage 4? Hearing this, Kang's mood shifted. He became depressed and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a deep and frustrated voice, he said, "The trouble started that night. Every time I fell asleep, my so-called party members would murder me in my sleep." Kang's voice grew louder as he recalled the events. "Those bastards were supposed to take turns keeping watch, but every single time I went to sleep, despite all I did for them, some party member would kill me in my sleep." This happened to Kang repeatedly for an entire month. He shouted so loudly in his frustration that he spilled food all over Juhi's face. Juhi, wiping her face angrily, snapped, "Eat first, then talk, you crazy bastard!" Kang, now a bit calmer, started eating slowly. After a few bites, Juhi asked, "So how did Kang manage to complete Stage 4 today?" At this, Kang finally broke down. He started laughing like a psychopath, like a man who had lost his mind, with saliva dripping from his mouth. His eyes glowed red as he said, "I just eliminated all the annoying pests and moved on." The scene flashed back to the previous day. Kang stood with his party members who, as usual, started arguing. But this time, Kang's patience snapped. All the veins in his face popped out as he shouted, "To hell with the system! To hell with leadership!" He roared so loudly, using his lion's roar, that everyone's ears almost burst. One of the party members, a witch who had killed Kang the most times, started yelling at him, asking what he was doing. But Kang was beyond reason. He pointed his sword at her chest and, with deadly eyes and a deep voice, said, "From now on, you all will follow my instructions. If anyone even itches without my permission, I will cut them from head to toe." Another party member, a yellow-haired guy named Pidu, tried to protest. "Are you crazy? Why should we listen to you?" But before he could finish his sentence, Kang punched him hard. Not just once, he kept punching him until Pidu was nearly dead. His face swelled up, his teeth were broken, and he cried so hard he couldn't even speak. He just nodded, saying, "I agree." The others were in shock, including the girl who started crying. After a moment, Kang, with that same deadly expression, repeated, "If anyone even itches without my permission, I will make sure you will beg me to die." After this, Kang went on a rampage, speed running through the dungeon. He raided it 29 times, so he remembers every route. So just in 8 hours, without sleeping, Kang slaughtering all the monsters one by one. He reached the dungeon's core and destroyed it in an instant. As soon as he did, the system congratulated Kang for completing Stage 4, awarding him a Ring of Strong Mind, a B-grade item. Kang's status window showed that he was now level 15, with strength at 17, agility at 16, endurance at 17, and magic at 15. By this time, Kang had raided the dungeon 30 times, collecting a vast amount of loot in his inventory: armor, weapons, pearls, magic stones. But he didn't even know what they were for. The Ring of Strong Mind made Kang immune to any mental attacks. Despite all the strength he had gained in the tutorial, none of it seemed to matter in the real world. But after Stage 5, Kang's body became the same as it was in the tutorial. He tried many times to use his powers, but he was still unable to do so. Right now, Kang was doing push-ups, his body now thick, muscular, and juicy. What a body. He finally completed his 1,000th push-up with one hand, sweat dripping from his body and evaporating as heat. After his push-up session, he wiped the sweat off and thought, "When will I finally complete Stage 8? As he pondered this, his phone rang. He thought it was just an ad, but as soon as he read the message, the ground beneath his feet trembled. There was a dungeon breakout, and the monster from that dungeon was a goblin. And this dungeon had opened right in front of the place where Juhi worked. Kang didn't waste a second. He ran to his house, searching frantically for a weapon. He looked left and right, panicking, cursing under his breath. Finally, he found a kitchen knife in the basin. Without wasting another moment, he grabbed it and dashed out of the house. A short while later, Kang stood outside Juhi's office. He took a deep breath and shouted, "It's been a while, you son of a chicken lollipop!" Hearing Kang's voice, all the goblins were immediately attracted to him. Kang was a little disappointed, thinking, as expected, I still can't use my skills. But that was a different story. Hearing Kang's outburst, all the goblins started running towards him, ready to kill. But instead of fear, Kang was filled with joy. He cursed the goblins, saying, "Why do you sound like monkeys?" Inside, Kang was cautious, realizing that this was his first time fighting real monsters outside the tutorial. He wondered if these goblins were more powerful or weaker than the ones in the tutorial. Pushing those thoughts aside, he gripped his knife like a pro and, in a single moment, sliced off a goblin's head with a satisfying smile. The goblin died instantly, and Kang, with a deadly and sinister smile, thanked all the goblins, saying, "In the first stage, I couldn't satisfy my hunger by killing only 4 or 5 goblins. Until I kill more than 100 goblins, I won't find peace." He pulled his kitchen knife out of the goblin's head and started slaughtering the goblins one by one. Meanwhile, inside Juhi's office, all the workers barricaded the entrance door with all the furniture they could find. But outside, someone was laughing like crazy, and heavy footsteps echoed as they approached the building. Everyone, including Juhi, was terrified. Juhi looked at her phone, and there was a message from Kang asking if she was still in the office. "If you are, then stay there," he wrote. Juhi was confused. Is Kang coming here? She wondered. But before she could complete her thought, that maniacal laughter grew louder, and the footsteps grew heavier. Suddenly, Kang burst through the door, smashing through all the heavy furniture. Covered in goblin blood, Kang stood there with a satisfying smile, like a psychopathic, cold-hearted murderer. Smiling, he said, "Juhi!" Your big brother is here." After a moment, everyone paused for a couple of seconds, just staring at Kang. They couldn't quite comprehend who this psychopath in front of them was. Even Juhi, seeing Kang in this condition, felt embarrassed. All her friends started glancing at her, their eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. Kang stood there, a kitchen knife slung over his shoulder, scanning the office as if trying to process that Juhi actually worked here. But before he could say anything, an old man, the department head, freaked out. He shouted at Kang, "Who the hell are you? And how did you break down the door to get inside?" At this rate, all the monsters. Before the man could finish his sentence, Kang politely apologized, saying he couldn't control his powers and accidentally used too much strength. But don't worry, I've already sent all the goblins outside straight to hell. Everyone was shocked seeing the dead goblins laying lifeless on the floor. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Before anyone could say another word, Kang chuckled and said, "He saw a lot of goblins in the alley in the nearby building, so I'll take care of them too." With that, he casually rested the goblin's sword on his shoulder, turned around and walked forward with swagger. He threw a glance back toward everyone and with a smirk said, "If I don't kill those goblins, I won't sleep peacefully tonight." The scene then shifted, showing Kang tied up in bandages, with Juhi tending to his wounds. Juhi, clearly annoyed, scolded him. "We don't have much saline water left. If you were going to get this injured, why'd you go out to kill all those goblins just to look cool?" Kang patted his body and shrugged. Right now, he is just an ordinary person. He can't use the skills he had in the tutorial, so yeah, he got a few scratches here and there, but it's no big deal. Juhi, her expression serious, warned Kang. If he can't use his abilities here, that means if he die, Kang might die for real. Kang brushed it off with a smirk. Yeah, but you gotta admit, what he did was pretty cool, right? Juhi, cracking a smile, reluctantly agreed. Yeah, it was cool. And just like that, their playful brother-sister banter kicked off again. Then, with a mischievous grin, Juhi leaned in and whispered in Kang's ear that all her friends have fallen for Kang after that cool act he pulled. They're driving her crazy, begging her to introduce them to Kang. Hearing this, our single virgin Kang started blushing and drifted off into his thoughts. But night soon fell, and as Kang went back to sleep, he was instantly greeted by the same voice, welcoming him to Stage 5. The voice announced, "The theme of this stage is wisdom." Kang didn't quite understand what wisdom meant in this context, but before he could wrap his head around it, a group of thick, juicy, plot-twisting mommy milkers girls appeared around him. They asked with seductive voices, "Are you the succubus?" Kang was utterly confused. Then the system notified him that the objective of this stage was to identify and kill the succubus hiding among these women. However, the catch was that once Kang discovered the succubus's true identity, he would become its first target. Hearing the word succubus, Kang's imagination ran wild. In his mind, he imagined a thick, juicy woman, seductive like a vampire, calling out to him. He remembered from games that a succubus drains men's juice, and now, with all these beautiful women in front of him, his single status ignited his inner passion. Before Kang could get too lost in his fantasies, a young, cute girl approached him. With a seductive voice, she asked, "What do you think? Who among us is the succubus?" For the first time, Kang found himself face to face with a girl who was not only cute, but also talking to him. He blushed, stammering, I don't know." But before he could say anything more, the system notified him that his ring of strong will was blocking a mental attack. Kang instantly realized that this girl was the succubus trying to control his mind. As night fell, Kang sat by the campfire, reflecting on the stages he had completed. Stage 1 was a nightmare of an inferno circus. Stage 2 was a brutal battle with goblins. Stage 3 had him crawling through mud for 10 hours only to get peed on by a monster. And Stage 4 was a month-long group project from hell. Kang chuckled to himself, thinking, finally I can enjoy something interesting after all that. The guy who had been cursing God all this time suddenly found himself thanking God, saying, "Thank you, God. Finally I can have some fun with these beautiful women." He was laughing so perverted that he had to control himself, thinking, no, I need to keep my cool. If the succubus finds out, I'm done for. And since the succubus only targeted men and Kang had mental protection, it meant that the succubus was toying with the other male NPCs. So for now, he decided to get some sleep. Tomorrow, he would make friends with the other female NPCs and finally defeat the succubus. But as soon as he woke up, he realized he wasn't in the tutorial anymore. He was back in Juhi's office. Startled, he shouted, waking up. Everyone around him cheered, congratulating him for heroically defeating the goblins. Even the male workers had become fans of Kang. They told him the good news. The army had arrived, but Kang wasn't in the mood to listen. He was still furious, angry at the succubus for almost getting the better of him. He muttered to himself that the succubus must have figured out that he knew her identity and had tried to kill him in his sleep. Just then, the rumbling of army trucks brought Kang back to reality. The whole building shook from the vibrations. The army had arrived, fully armed with AK-47S, M416S, and machine gun, mowing down goblins left and right. Everyone on the rooftop cheered with relief, but Kang sensed something was off. A creepy, chilling aura filled the air. Kang's eyes darted around until he spotted it. The army was gunning down goblins, but something wasn't right. Then he saw it, a red goblin with a spear, dodging every bullet fired at him. In one swift motion, the goblin separated a soldier's head from his body with a single blow. Panic erupted as the soldiers unleashed a hail of gunfire, but the goblin didn't even get a scratch. Instead, he grew angrier, his eyes turning blood red. With a terrifying roar, he charged at the army trucks, leaping into the air and slaughtered everyone in his path with a single strike. Kang watched all of this unfold from above, but it didn't end there. The red, ugly, thick goblin turned its creepy, deadly eyes directly toward Kang, staring right into his soul from across the building. That ugly-ass goblin had already taken down 3 army trucks, leaving just one standing. Panic set in among the soldiers as they frantically called for backup over the mic, but that didn't stop the ugly ass. After obliterating the remaining trucks, the ugly ass stood triumphantly on top of the last one, a lustful, perverted grin spreading across his face like he was ready to suck them dry. Now, I don't know about other goblins, but let me tell you, when you see one looking like that, you better call a goblin slayer. The soldiers trembled in fear, their hands shaking as they tried to hold their weapons steady. The red goblin, with one powerful leap, launched himself at them. One brave soldier pulled out his M416 and began firing, but he knew deep down he was fucked up. Just as the red goblin was about to finish off the soldier, Kang arrived on the scene. Without a second thought, Kang picked up a massive piece of concrete and hurled it straight at the goblin's face. The impact sent the goblin flying far back. The soldiers, still in shock, tried to comprehend what had just happened. Who or what had just saved them? Kang entered the truck in style, a villainous smile playing on his lips. The soldiers, already scared of the red goblin, felt a new wave of fear wash over them as they looked at Kang's menacing grin. One soldier, his voice trembling, shouted, "It's a new monster attack! Fire at will!" Kang, now panicking himself, shouted back, "I'm a human! Are you crazy?" The soldier took a closer look and realized that despite his monstrous appearance, Kang was indeed human. Embarrassed, he muttered an apology, thinking Kang might be one of the awakened they had called for support. But Kang wasn't focused on the soldier's apology. He noticed the red goblin slowly getting back up. Kang didn't decide to help the army because he was kind and wanted to act like a hero. No. He realized that if the army lost, the goblin would have come straight for him, putting Juhi in danger. Deciding it was better to take the goblin down with the army's help, he acted swiftly. Kang hopped off the truck and asked the soldiers, "You guys got any tear gas?" They nodded, but mentioned they didn't have an extra mask for Kang. Without hesitation, Kang replied, "He don't need a tear gas mask." The soldiers, confused, prepared to throw the tear bomb as soon as Kang engaged. Meanwhile, Juhi was freaking out, wondering what the hell Kang was thinking, going down to fight with no abilities. But it was time for the showdown. Kang versus the ugly-ass red goblin. Kang grinned, his excitement barely contained. "I've killed so many goblins, but none of them gave me the satisfaction I craved. Finally, a worthy opponent." Well, at this point, Kang officially became the Goblin Slayer. The red goblin seemed to understand Kang's taunt, growing increasingly annoyed. Before their fight could escalate, the soldier tossed the tear bomb. As it exploded, the red goblin went berserk. His eyes filled with tears and he screamed in agony, thrashing about wildly. Kang's eyes watered too, but after surviving hellish days with goblins, Kang had learned one thing. Goblins are sensitive as hell when it comes to their eyes. As for Kang, after being tortured and experiencing so much unimaginable pain, he just became Kaneki. This much pain was no big deal to him. He just laughed maniacally, exited to kill some goblin. With that, Kang dashed toward the ugly-ass goblin, Despite the water streaming from his eyes, nose, and, from God know where, Kang unleashed a barrage of attacks on the goblin, who could do nothing but close his eyes and stand there, unable to fight back. But after a while, Kang realized something unsettling. His attacks weren't even scratching the goblin. Meanwhile, the soldiers watched from a distance, wondering, is this crazy guy was actually an awakener? Just then, a voice from behind one of the soldiers said, "I thought I was the only one who came here for support. Who's this guy?" As the mysterious figure continued to watch Kang from a distance, Kang noticed that despite all his efforts, his sword was completely worn out, and the goblin still hadn't taken any damage. Kang's eyes, still filled with tears, focused on the goblin's skin. It was incredibly tough, much tougher than he'd anticipated. If only he had his skills, he could have sliced through it in an instant, but without them, it was nearly impossible to cause any real damage. Just as Kang was wondering what to do next, someone zoomed past him, a blur of speed, and unleashed a flurry of attacks on the red goblin. Kang was surprised. This guy was fast, no doubt about it. But even with this new assault, the red goblin didn't get a single scratch. The fast guy and Kang locked eyes, and the newcomer asked, "Are you an awakener? If so, we don't have time for introductions. We need to do something to take this bastard down." Kang nodded in agreement, and together they launched a coordinated attack on the goblin. Kang struck from behind while the fast guy attacked from the front, but still, the goblin remained unscathed. Kang realized just how insanely tough the goblin's body was. Normal attacks weren't going to cut it, literally. Kang's sword was nearly destroyed when he spotted a pointed axe nearby. He ran to grab it, and the fast guy, noticing, called out, "I've got the speed, but I don't have the attack power." Kang didn't even respond. He just picked up the axe with a serious expression, knowing he had to end this now. Kang thought to himself, this ugly-ass red goblin merely defending, waiting for his chance to strike back once the tear gas wore off. Kang knew he had to find the goblin's weakness, fast. He figured the goblin's body was as hard as iron, but maybe there was a softer spot somewhere. His eyes, his mouth. But the goblin's defense was too strong. Then Kang had an idea. He ran toward the goblin with the axe, screaming as he did. In one swift motion, he penetrated the goblin. The red goblin paused, feeling a strange mix of pain and pleasure, unable to comprehend the sensation. Even the fast guy was shocked at what Kang had just done. Kong, with a twisted smile, used Kakashi's 100 Years of Death extreme version, inserting the axe deep inside the ugly ass. "Well, this is one hell of a way to pop your first cherry," Kong muttered with a deep, satisfying voice. "Now I will show you what true hell is." That's it for the Assbuster episode, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Goodbye and see you in the next one.